maybe you and Joey are obviously huge Superman fans, and huge DC fans as well. Now this is the biggest sort of sci-fi take we've ever seen on Superman. There's a lot of time
Totally.
spent on Krypton and a lot of time spent with Jor-El. So, what did you guys think of the sci-fi elements? First of all, kicking this off, and do you think there was too much Krypton or just enough?
I would have loved to see more Krypton. The whole opening sequence I thought was fantastic. I love all that stuff. I love that they went so sci-fi with it because I think a lot of people tend to forget, or like, if you're not a fan of the comics, maybe sort of more into the Donner, movie, and that's sort of your take on Superman. I think you can forget how sci-fi it gets a lot of the times. Lots of aliens and lots of space stuff. So I was really happy to see all that.
I will echo Joey's sentiments about loving the sheer amount of science fiction that was in the movie. I thought that I was pleasantly surprised that essentially the entire first act is on Krypton, and then that the sci-fi stuff obviously doesn't end there. The fact that Zod shows up with spaceships, with his soldiers, and that the Kryptonian tech is still such a part throughout the entire movie, I thought was a lot of fun. I grew up obviously with the Christopher Reeve movies, but the old George Reeves TV series was on reruns, and that with the exception of the very first episode, it never really dealt with the fact that he was an alien, and certainly the cartoons, he was just a superhero. So reminding everybody that he is not of this earth, and that there is so much stuff out there that will now change the way Earth views Superman and superheroes and stuff like that was really cool.
Yeah, it caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting it. They said ahead of time that this is going to be a modern take on Superman, but I didn't really think that was going to be, that it would be. I keep describing it today to people that it was more sci-fi than superhero, right? We're so used to seeing either the Nolan Batmans or what's been happening with Spider-Man so much that, you don't even think about it anymore that this guy is an alien who came to Earth, and how would people react to that, and the fact that Jonathan and Martha go out of their way to keep him, from showing those powers, and then to have that all blow up at once was kind of crazy. And then for sure, I dug the Krypton stuff, and when it was happening, it was one of those things of we've never seen on film, at least, Jor-El and Lara really characterized this way, right? Where they have to wrestle with the fact that they're doing this and this is the end, and get to see them really be emotional and really be a couple. I really like that.
I mean, it starts with her giving birth. It was that was a part of Krypton I thought we'd never see.
It's definitely the Krypton stuff really sets up that he's an alien, and when he gets to Earth, he's dealing with the fact that he's so different from us, and I think in a way that's never really been discussed before in Superman films. Like, he has this moral responsibility, and the thing that he has to struggle with, and I think the thing that makes him diametrically opposed to somebody like Zod, is that he is a Kryptonian by birth. And he's got this like, oh, I was raised on Earth mentality, but his home planet, it should to Zod be very, very important to him. And I think what we learn by the end of the movie is that ultimately he's at least mostly an Earthman now. Like, he's accepted his new home.
Yeah, that's something that's always annoyed me. I remember in Lois and Clark, and I know Joey loves some Lois and Clark, when the new Krypton people showed up, and Kal-El was so quick to be like, well, I gotta go with them, it's how I am, or whatever. And then in the movie here, to see him, that he had become this, American, he'd become this Earthman, and he's going through all these different things, and he finally finds his family. Zod comes down, and he knows in his gut not to trust him. And then at the very end, right, when Zod tells him that, the fate of our race is in our hands, and he just goes, Krypton had its chance. It was like, holy, that was awesome. You know what I mean? It was awesome to see him know who his people were.
And also the fact that the movie kind of delved more into who were the Kryptonians, their entire civilization, the fact that they went out into space. It explains why they just choose Earth. The fact that they're all genetically engineered to serve certain purposes, that basically Zod is a warrior literally in his blood, and that Faora has basically had fear bred out of her. That's why she's such a badass. And that Kal-El is different because he's a natural birth. And that, all this stuff that I don't recall ever, I think it's all just an invention for the movie, I really felt added a lot to fleshing out what Krypton was, who they were. It used to kind of bug me that they're supposed to be this technologically advanced planet, but they make this big deal about you're all building one little spaceship. It's like, okay, you got to this point, but him basically building a smart car that can fly is a big deal. But so I liked all that. I liked that the sort of alien outposts that they had been on Earth before. It's never mentioned, but it makes you think, well, maybe that's why they can speak English. But that's just one of those sci-fi tropes that you accept.
Well, it's one of those things too. When he gets on the ship that had crashed there for however many thousands of years it was, he finds the dead person in the pod, but then there's one pod that's open with no one in it. So you it did some Kryptonians get off and somehow make love to us humans.
Make sweet Kryptonian love.
Sweet Kryptonian Earth love.
How does everybody feel? Do you feel like the Superman legend was treated with respect? Do you like any of the changes? Are there things that are problematic for you?
No, I thought they handled them with respect. I think the changes that they did make is inconsequential, how Lois and Clark met, because we've seen that so many times, so it's nice to have a fresh take on it. And it also sets up, the sequel that's already been greenlit. Their relationships can be very different than what we've seen in the past. And I think also the Lois and Clark thing, it sort of also addresses the problem of the secret identity, right? So Lois is the greatest reporter ever, basically, and she's never been able to see through that facade, right? But now that's sort of like taken out of the equation, and while it could still be an issue for other people, Perry and whoever, I think that does a lot for her character as well. But in general, I think they paid a lot of attention to Superman and his history and freshened it up a little bit, but did it in a way that was still respectful of what the core of that character is.
My only concern with this take on Superman, and I would imagine we're going to get to this in a larger discussion soon, is that he was so serious, and I understand he's got a lot going on, aliens are coming to Earth, all that, but he could have cracked a smile at a few more times. I love the whole thing about it's not an S. He's just so humorless, and I think we're used to a Superman that smiles a little bit even when things get rough. But table that for a minute. I think it's the fact that he, again, spoiler, he kills Zod with his bare hands. To me, that still kind of bugs me.
Really?
Yeah, it did. I don't know. I'll get over it.
Let's talk about it now. Let's talk about it right now, because I think it's central to the Superman character in some ways, but there is evidence in comics that he has killed before. I think in this particular scene, they set up the reason for it pretty. I mean, it was pretty. I don't want to say black and white, but there were going to be other people losing their lives, and potentially a lot of people. Zod makes that threat that, like, I'm going to pick these people off one by one until I'm done with everybody here. And I think that, coupled with the imminent, sort of demise of those people he was pointing his heat vision at, I was kind of like, okay, I can understand why he would, in that moment, make that choice.
Yeah, for me, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
This is the biggest modern moment, right? I think you talk to everybody right now who watches movies like this, or Colin Moriarty, my roommate, and I have talked about it. He didn't understand that Batman didn't kill till he watched it, and it's one of those things. In this instance, what other option did Kal-El have? What other option did Superman?
He could stick his fingers in his eyes.
Okay. Then we still have a blind, power-hungry superhero.
Yeah. So in my Hero Worship column, that's should be, if you're watching this, it's live on the site now. So
shameless plug.
Hey, whatever. Well, it's about this idea of because when I came out of the movie, up until that point, I was really having a great time and I loved it. And then he killed Zod, and I was like, well, Superman doesn't kill. That's like the cardinal rule, right? So, and coming out of the theater, I wasn't sure how I felt about it. Sitting on it for a few days, and also reading. There's an issue of John Byrne's Superman, issue 22 of the 87 volume.
Right.
That it's about Superman in a pocket universe where this pocket universe version of Zod and the Kryptonian army are basically killing people. They've killed like 5 billion people, and Superman makes the decision to kill them with green kryptonite, which doesn't harm him because it's alternate universe kryptonite, whatever. So he makes that decision, And ultimately, in the issues, at the end of that issue and the issues to follow, he has to deal with this choice that he makes. He returns to the regular universe, and he's very much aware that, he says as much as nothing's ever going to be the same because of what I've just done. And I think the movie presents a similar idea in that way, in that we see the reaction. Like, it's not a frivolous. He doesn't just dispatch of Zod. We see him upset. He's not even angry. He's like disappointed in himself almost. I would have liked to see more of that stuff in the movie.
That was for me when that happened. I thought that was such a powerful scene, and then Lois runs down to him and just holds him. I was hoping then the next scene was still him dealing with that aftermath. When instead it was, I've spiked the drone and I'm back doing. Don't be watching me, General. I'm hanging my cape somewhere. Boo! He's like, okay, well, I could have gone just a little more because I'd hope that with the inevitable sequel that opens up, it's similar to what they did with Iron Man 3 after Avengers, where that's not like as post-traumatic stress, but that he is dealing with it still. That it is something. Maybe we get the line right that he'll never do it again, and he can't, or whatever.
Right.
But if you think about it, Christopher Reeve's Superman killed too. I mean, he tossed everybody into the
that doesn't count though.
Yeah,
that's right. He just let them plummet. Maybe they never hit bottom.
Anything we can't judge it pre-crisis. All right, pre-crisis doesn't matter. I mean, if you want to go, like the best was if you remember the George Reeves stuff in an episode of Superman, they figured out he was Clark Kent, so he just flew them to a top of a mountain and left them.
Yeah.
Greater good. That's the question.
I think he just needs to have a beer with somebody and figure it all out after the fact. Like maybe if he just cracked open a bud. What do you guys think about the beer thing? People are talking about beer as well.
He grew up in Kansas. Of course he's going to drink a beer.
I'm a Mizzou guy. I hate KU with my heart, but that was awesome to see him watching KU football, wearing a Kansas shirt, wearing a Royals shirt, like being this grounded. I did grow up here. I am a farm boy at heart. I am doing all this. That was great.
Yeah.
And it's also hilarious because obviously it has no impact on him. So he's just drinking it because it's learned behavior, but it doesn't do a thing for him.
He likes the taste. I mean, he's a no duels man.
Who doesn't like Budweiser?
If he's drinking Budweiser, he does not like the taste.
King of beers, Joey. King of beers.
And also, Budweiser wouldn't have an effect even probably on a human. So.
So Nolan's influence. Let's talk about that a little bit because I think very much you see Zack Snyder in this movie, but what do you think was Nolan's influence on this project, and what do you think would have been different about it had he not been involved?
I think it would have been, first of all, I think Nolan's influence is that it brought that grounded approach and that serious approach, and Nolan has often said how much he loves the original Donner film, that was really the template for him approaching the Batman universe, from casting big name people to that sort of just like it's a superhero in a real world kind of thing. I think it probably wouldn't have turned out as well because he did bring a sense of authority to this procedure that perhaps another producer wouldn't have had as much control over. So I think the fact that it worked at all is a big testament to him, but also to David Goyer, who he wrote the Batman movies with, and who is a huge comic book fan. And I think without those two guys, it would have been a very different movie. And we've seen that movie. It was Superman Returns, which I didn't hate as much as everyone else. I thought it was actually fine, but it's too beholden to the Christopher Reeve stuff. This was a way to kind of acknowledge the impact of those movies, but do something entirely new.
Cool. What do you guys think, Joey?
I think you can see it in the way, beforehand they said there's no Phantom Zone, there's no Kryptonite, which was a total lie.
Yeah.
But I think the way that they present those things is very Nolan. There is like a pseudo-scientific explanation for how they use the Phantom Zone, and even Kryptonite. They don't ever call it that, but the idea of the radiation from Krypton is harmful to him. When he gets on board Zod's ship, you see that effect, which is the Kryptonite effect. They just don't actually call it by name. So
it normalizes him. It makes him of Krypton rather than of Earth.
Right. So I think you can see that. I think that's a Nolan thing.
Yeah, I mean, what everybody said, I think that was it. Yeah, just the fact that they tried to set this in a world you could believe in, right? Especially with the driving force of, that when Perry wanted to print the story, right? He's like, what can you imagine? I've never thought of that. I've never thought about what would the world's reaction be, even if a benevolent alien showed up. It's like, oh yeah, you're right, because you've read comics for so long that you just take it for granted that everybody's gonna be like, oh hey, what's up, Double X? You got these things growing out of your head and you're just talking to us, no big deal.
Yeah, and usually, like, in any time we've seen, like, the first contact sort of story, in almost any medium with Superman, it's, like, this amazing thing. Like, everyone's, like, cheering and everyone's super happy. Except for Lex, of course, who's always upset. Which, I do want to bring up. There's some cool LexCorp things in the movie, little teases. But I think in a sequel, they've really already established an opportunity for Lex, because you have Superman showing up, causing all of this destruction, and basically decimating Smallville, basically decimating half of Metropolis, and he's publicly killed somebody. People have seen him do that, so I think that presents an opportunity for Lex to step forward and be like, why is everyone so excited about this guy? Look at all the terrible things he's done.
And I can rebuild your city at a good rate. So
exactly. When I was watching it and they were tearing it apart, I was like, this is insane. I can't believe in the first movie they're doing this. But then you're like, yeah, it totally sets it up so that when number 2 comes out, it's already rebuilt and pristine, and it's got Lex all over everything.
Right. But also, too, like if it's a real world approach, I mean, think about the economic impact of basically Metropolis getting destroyed. Like, the world will just plummet into, like, economic chaos. And somebody like a Lex Luthor would totally prey upon that. And the fact that there's now all this alien tech lying around, he's going to be the one sort of black marketing stuff like that, or pulling it apart to see how it works, or even like what happens to Zod's body. You mean they're not going to, like, well, good luck trying to dissect that, I guess, because you have to be able to cut into it. But somebody like him would totally find ways to maybe, I don't know, clone his own Kryptonians or something.
Yeah, something like that. My question real quick before we jump, Joey, what were the references you caught? Because I caught the tanker, the gasoline thing, and then jumping a little bit, I caught the Wayne satellite when you were out in space. But those were the only 2 I got, probably because I was in 3D and 3D's terrible.
I mean, yeah, the tanker I think is the most overt one that you see, even though it's only in the frame for a second. It's the biggest one.
Yeah.
The Wayne Enterprises thing was cool.
What's the tanker? I didn't catch that one.
When Clark gets back to Smallville and he's walking up the driveway to his house, there's a giant tractor-trailer truck that drives by in the distance. There's just a giant LexCorp.
That wasn't even the one I was referencing. The one I was referencing, when he's fighting Zod, I believe, in Smallville, he gets punched into a tanker, and it's the LexCorp.
Okay, I didn't even catch that one. So it's everywhere, and it's on the buildings, and which we saw in the trailer too, but on the buildings in the city. And then there's the Wayne Enterprises satellite, but I mean, those are the only ones that I caught. I don't think they ever say it by name or anything.
Oh, no, yeah, that's the whole thing. I'm excited to go see it again tonight, and now just watch the background nonstop.
Yeah, exactly.
In fact, did they even say the word Metropolis at any point?
No, but you do see it on screen at one point.
Right.
Okay.
So, guys, what did you think of Henry Cavill as Superman? Was he perfect for the role? Is there somebody else you would have liked to see more?
I think he was physically, just like Superman. Again, my only gripe was that he was so serious, and so those moments where he does crack a smile, like, he seems more like Superman. And the fact that Superman is basically his quest is to be humanized, I think a little levity would have gone a long way.
For me, I kind of thought that. Since the majority of this movie was dealing with some really big issues in his life and in the world, the seriousness didn't bother me as much, and I think there were a couple moments of levity, but I get where you're coming from, especially when you relate it to, like, when you compare it to, like, the Donner movies. I feel like Superman was, there was a lot more levity to those performances. But yeah, I can see where you're coming from, but it didn't bother me personally. It wasn't something that I noticed until after it was pointed out.
For me, in the beginning, it was one of those things of I was trying to get my bearings in this new universe and, like, saw they were going with Lois and him and the Discovery. And then when he actually donned the suit and started talking to people, for me, he looked and sounded like Superman. I think the voice when he's talking to the general and when he's answering questions and stuff, I thought really carried itself well to being Superman. I really dug his performance.
Well, thanks so much, guys, for hanging out with us. If you have any thoughts on Man of Steel, leave them in the comments below. And thanks for watching.